Welcome to part 2 of the analyzations. I'm going to have the 2-to-1 counterpoint and then the 3-to-1 counterpoint after this. Basically, in the first videos, I was just looking at some main things that pointed out to me. And actually, looking back, I realized one thing I didn't point out in both of the videos was direct motion to perfect intervals. So in this video, that's basically what this video is going to be about. I'm going to go over the same examples throughout the video, and I'm going to show the areas that have direct motion to perfect intervals. Okay, so let's get into it, but first thing to point out is that, so in this case of 2-to-1 counterpoint, when you have perfect intervals occurring on beat 2 of the meter, then it's not moving in parallel motion. What's happening is this top voice is staying oblique, and in this case the bottom voice is moving up a step. The whole point, since it's a 2-to-1 ratio, when you're on that note that's not on the strong beat, and you're creating that perfect interval, then it's approached fine because you're allowed to have a top voice staying oblique while another voice moves into a perfect interval. Of course, the best is to have contrary motion, but in the case where one voice is staying the same, like here in a 2-to-1 ratio, then you're not going to be able to do the contrary motion because one of the voices is just going to be staying the same. Okay, so that concludes the fact that we're not going to be looking at the weak beat for our perfect intervals. What we're going to be looking at is the downbeat or the strong beat. Okay, and we do see a perfect interval on the strong beat here, and it is approached in direct motion, so this is something you don't want. So as you can see, this voice actually leaps way up here and then goes down here, while this voice steps down there. So although the bottom voice leaps up into the middle of these two voices, which might look like contrary motion to some extent, since the top voice is moving down and the bottom voice is then having to move down as well. When you're actually analyzing the separate voices, this is direct motion. So how could we fix this? We could just take this third here, and instead of leaping way up a fourth to a third, we could just go down a second to an octave, and then it's moving up to the fifth. So here's an interesting case, is that we have two perfect intervals, but they're traveling in contrary motion to each other. The octave is going in contrary motion to the fifth. So this is actually allowed. This is like the best thing you can do if you're having a perfect interval to another perfect interval. Of course, you're probably not going to be striving to do a bunch of perfect intervals to perfect intervals using contrary motion, because again, you're using the perfect intervals, and the nature of the perfect intervals within themselves can have a lot more of a hollow sound than the other intervals, especially with the octave and then next the fifth, those being the first two overtones of the overtone series, which have a tendency to harmonize with that note below it. Okay, so that's it for this example. Okay, next example, we're just going to take a brief look at this because this is actually what you want. So here we have contrary motion going to a fifth because the bottom voice is moving down a step and the top voice is also moving up a step. But the whole point is that they're moving in contrary motion to the perfect interval of the fifth. So that's what you want. Okay, so in this one I already went over the parallel fifths. So you can see those right there. We have a fifth going to a fifth right next to each other. Parallel fifths, in any case, wherever you are in the meter, if you have two of the same perfect intervals next to each other, harmonizing with those different notes in the given melody, then you're going to have parallel perfect intervals no matter what. But then right after that, there's an octave, and that is being approached in direct motion. So you do not want that. As you can see, the counterpoint is moving up a step, the given melody is leaping up in the same direction. So this would be the type of direct motion of similar motion, which in direct motion there's two types. There's the similar motion, where the two intervals are traveling in the similar motion, but they're not using the same intervals. And then you have parallel motion, another type of direct motion, where the intervals are traveling the same direction and leaping or stepping using the same interval. So like here you have parallel fifths because the given melody is moving down a fifth, and the counterpoint is also moving down a fifth. They're both moving in parallel motion, and it's two fifths moving in parallel motion. Okay, that's it for this one. As you can see, most of the downbeats in all these examples are imperfect consonants, which is something that's really good to strive for, because then you won't have as many problems having to do contrary motion all the time, which sometimes can be a little awkward when trying to create melodic fluency. And then the other big thing is imperfect intervals. You're able to create better voice leading than the perfect intervals, just playing the intervals themselves. Okay, so strive for your imperfect consonances on your strong beats. Okay, here we have the same problem. This one's actually pretty bad because we have an octave going to a fifth, and as you can see, it's going in direct motion. The counterpoint is moving down that step, and the given melody is traveling down a fifth. So since they're moving in that same direction, we have that similar motion, a type of direct motion that's not allowed, and then right after that, it's actually the same thing as before. We have this fourth going to the eighth, and it's moving in direct motion. And that's it for this one. So as you can see, it can be really easy to create direct motion to a perfect interval because you're trying to create that nice flow of the melody. Okay, so if we go back to the actual measures and we think if we want to go from this fifth to this octave, already we shouldn't be doing that because we already have a perfect interval here going to another perfect interval here, moving in direct motion on the downbeats. So that's also something you want to avoid right there. So basically this whole area is just a big example of a no. Alright, try to look at this one for just a little bit and try to find the problem before I tell you. Okay, so as we can see, we have two fives right next to each other. So instantly a red flag, we have parallel fifths. And again, if we wanted to fix that, we could, since we have a sixth here, we could just change that to an octave again, just for an example, just to show you that now it's traveling in contrary motion because the counterpoint is going up and the given melody is going down. So one thing good to note is that changing your interval sometimes can mess up the total flow of the melody that you're trying to make. So that's why it's good to think about these things before and not have to fix them after. In this case, it actually turns out fine. So sometimes where you need to place your note in order to create contrary motion is going to make the melody awkward unless you plan for it in the beginning. So make sure that you really watch out for the perfect intervals on the downbeats, and that could be one of the kind of focus points when you're creating your melody is, okay, how am I going to approach these perfect intervals while still maintaining the melody that I want? Okay, this next example, in the original video I thought these things were so obvious that I didn't point them out, which is a bad thing because this was an analyzation video, so I probably should have pointed out everything. So in the future videos, I'm actually going to point out everything and not just like the main things. So that was just a mistake. But here we have an octave going to a fifth, so already we have two perfect intervals next to each other. And again, that's already just not the best choice. But then as you can see, it's moving in direct motion. The counterpoint on the top's moving up, and the given melody on the bottom is also moving up. And then probably the worst one of them all is two parallel octaves next to each other. And octaves are probably the worst to do parallel, and just especially here, just in that closed position, because the first overtone of this note is literally the note of the octave. So the counterpoint is harmonizing with the first overtone of the given melody. In both of these cases, already making it hard to distinguish the note from the given melody. So in terms of creating voice leading, this is really bad. Not that having an open octave is going to be a lot better, but the fact that this closed octave is literally harmonizing with the first overtone of the overtone series makes it an exceptionally dull sound that blends really well with the note below it. And then at the end we have a fifth that is approached in contrary motion, so that's good. And of course the cadence formulas at the end always create contrary motion to that perfect interval. Okay, so that's it for this video. I'm going to have a 3-to-1 counterpoint video as well, and it's going to be the same ordeal. So my next analyzation videos, I'm just going to have everything in the one video, all the mistakes pointed out, because I realized that if people were trying to use this as an example, and if I didn't point out all of the mistakes, people might not think that there are mistakes in the examples, but I made mistakes in the examples on purpose, and I should have pointed them all out because of that. In my future videos, I'll also show from the mistakes, like in this video, how you could fix them, and then also give advice how you could avoid them from the beginning. So be sure to check out the 3-to-1 counterpoint analysis video, and then I'm also going to have a 4-to-1 counterpoint and also a suspension counterpoint analysis video. So until next time, bye.